exposed to an industry that was going through some transformation that I think, at least in my mind as a teenager, convinced me that there was sufficient opportunity to take such a such a risk in life. And look, if you are going to take that risk, I have to say, doing it as a teenager is a pretty good time. You have no really other responsibilities in life.
You talk about the transition from Shift 4, payment processing, fintech, to aviation. They seem like very different worlds to me. Maybe there's something I'm missing.
Sure. I mean, probably worth pointing out, my aviation career really, more or less began in 2004, 2005. I was basically doing exactly what I just told you all, which was burning myself out in my day job, and I was waking up on my keyboard in my parents' basement. I was like, I need a hobby in life. I need something. And I went back to my true childhood passion for aviation. I mean, since kindergarten, I was always enamored with space and flying, and told my kindergarten teacher I'd be an astronaut. I went to space camp. I built my first computer because I wanted to fly a flight simulator. So that was what I chose to kind of balance out my near total focus on business. And I was lucky that it did lead me on some pretty incredible adventures. So have had kind of parallel careers, including a defense aerospace company, of which what are the similarities with what I'll call normal business, like doing business with the government versus normal business? There are no similarities. It teaches you a lot of things what not to do. I will say though that just in terms of general life experiences, I mean, in that company, we traveled around the world to all sorts of countries buying fighter jets. I mean, you're having meetings in room that look like the UN with 100 flags. It was cool. You certainly learned an awful lot. It did teach you a lot about how our government works for, all of its imperfections and blemishes. There is a lot of people talk about government corruption. Like you don't know government corruption until you try and buy fighter jets from countries around the world. The U.S. is actually pretty pristine relative to how a lot of other countries do business. But I will say, what's common between the two? There has to be opportunity. Again, there has to be, a solution to a problem you identified, or a better solution that you can, support with a real revenue model. If this works out, it will, generate more revenue than the cost that you have to put into it. And that was absolutely what we identified when we started dropping the defense company. It's certainly what led me to my payments company that ultimately became Shift 4. And there's things that you can apply to both too. Like aviation teaches you to be very procedurally driven. Processes incredibly important. A culture of briefing and debriefing successes and failures to make it better, and bring that into my day job. I think was helpful. So even though your end users and your customers are very different in their approach, there are some similarities between the two, and one can help make the other a little better.
And I'm sure there were setbacks and failures in both.
Absolutely. In Shift 4, we started in 1999, so you've got 26 years here where the country certainly had numerous economic downturns that you had to make your way through. And we were never a Silicon Valley darling. Like, we never had a Series A, B, C, or D. I mean, we had to get profitable quick and grow through our own cash flows. There wasn't an army of investors to help you through the Great Recession in 08, 09, or even the dot-com bubble bursting in the first couple of years. So, for sure. But all of those, I do believe, that you make you stronger as an organization. You learn a lot from it. There are great teaching environments. And then in Draken, I'd already been flying, high-performance aircraft for a long time. But we were basically we were doing fighter jets as a service. If I had known to call it that in 2011, we certainly would have had no trouble raising capital. Instead, it was a self-funded endeavor. But it was cool. Our job was basically to be professional bad guys, to fly, replicating, Russian, Chinese, Iranian tactics, and using foreign aircraft every day, flying, 20, 30, 40 sorties against the Department of Defense. It was a super cool job, but I knew in that line of work that there are bad days. And it was 6 months after we got our first big contract with the Air Force that we had someone eject from an aircraft with an engine failure. And it was like, how could this nightmare happen so early on out of the gate? And the Air Force had some fantastic leadership at the time that just said, like, we all know this is always a question of when. It's a little bit earlier than we would have all liked on this one, but we have a job to do and get back to it. And we're very fortunate to have good, smart leaders that can help us, and we learn from it for sure.
So obviously, the main topic for the conversation today, I think, is going to be about space. And so, can you talk a little bit about when you decided that going to space was something that you wanted to do, and then at what point did it actually seem like it was going to be possible, realistic?
I'm glad you phrased it so quick, because I decided I wanted to do this when I was in kindergarten.
You weren't sure that it was possible?
No, and the whole reason I became a pilot was because I was like, that's a lot more realistic. And but it was in 2008, after I came back from a record flight, that it was a speed around the world flight, and I was invited by Dr. Peter Diamandis to go to Baikonur, Kazakhstan, with some of the early pioneers of what would become the commercial space industry, and see a Soyuz launch. It was a partially commercial mission, and at that point I was like, well, it's possible if what they intend to do were to succeed. Like, there is a chance that space could open up beyond just the extraordinary lucky few that get struck by lightning and become NASA astronauts. But even then, I pretty much put 99.9% of my brain power on things that were right in front of me that I thought were more real. It wasn't until 2020, when SpaceX had just proven their Dragon spaceflight capability with the Demo 2 mission. So this is before they even resumed operational flights for NASA from U.S. soil. So for those that aren't aware, we actually took a hiatus from sending American astronauts to space from the United States for nearly a decade when the shuttle was retired. And at that moment, I would have thought SpaceX would have said, give us 5 years to get our footing, and then we'll talk, commercial missions. And they were like, no, we're in. Before they even launched NASA's Crew 1, they were like, we're doing this. This is our dream. We want to make life multiplanetary. We want to make humankind a true spacefaring civilization. And now is as good a time as any in their minds. And so Inspiration 4 was born before even NASA's Crew 1 flight had taken place.
And tell me about how that went from those initial conversations to actually happening.
Yeah, it went shockingly fast. Within weeks of the first conversation, did we have the initial framework. And then, again, we had our ceremonial signing of what would be the Inspiration 4 mission at Kennedy Space Center before NASA Crew 1 launched. So at that point, SpaceX had one up, one down. That was it. And they said, okay, we're ready to kind of expand our addressable market from NASA to everybody else, at some point. And so that was in October, November of 2020, and we launched September 15th of 2021. So they moved very quickly.
So you were willing to trust this organization that had gone up into space once with your life, essentially?
I never had a doubt at all, and that was just from the outside looking in. I credit SpaceX with really reinvigorating the world's interest in space exploration. The Simo booster landings from their inaugural Falcon Heavy mission, I think, inspired a whole generation of future explorers and scientists and engineers. And something I point out all the time, I just mentioned our kind of small group discussions, usually whenever there's a major technological breakthrough, you're 6 months behind at most for the second mover. iPhone comes out, Android 6 months later. It is rare that someone has such a breakthrough with no one to follow. And at the time that we were creating Inspiration 4, SpaceX had spent 5 years of launching and catching orbital-class rockets on ships and then using them again. 5 years, almost 100 launches that they had captured successfully already, and no one had done it once. Now I can tell you it's been more than 10 years since they did that for the first time, and no one has done it yet. So that certainly instills a lot of confidence. That's outside looking in. Once you're inside the organization, you understand their philosophies, how they execute every single day. The confidence only goes up, training only instills that more. I had no doubts that it was going to be a successful mission.
So can you talk about your goal of going into space yourself and sort of leading this first mission, Inspiration 4? What were you seeking to accomplish? Why did you do it?
Well, I mean, I think there were a lot of constraints on first because it was the first, and it really boiled down to inspiration. We wanted to assemble, a crew of some very inspiring individuals. I never met them, like Kaylee Arsenault, still youngest American to orbit, childhood cancer survivor, only wanted to just live and then be able to grow up and work at St. Jude and help other kids in the same fight. And that's exactly what she was doing as a physician assistant at St. Jude when she got the call and said, do you want to go to space? We had an Air Force veteran who worked on some of the Air Force's big ICBM rockets, got to ride on one. Dr. Cyan Proctor became the first black female pilot of a spacecraft, runner-up at NASA. I mean, she's a geoscience scientist professor. She worked at analog astronaut programs. She did everything she could, never gave up, and obviously got to fly it. So put together an inspiring crew, and then not just inspiration about what you can accomplish in space someday, this future that we might all be excited for, but what we can do here on Earth, because that is an argument that has gone back since the 1960s of how can we put money into what we want to do in space when we got so much wrong here on Earth. Like, just hit the pause button on all progress, please, so we can try and solve all the world's problems, which doesn't work that way, right? You got to do both. You have to make some investments in a brighter future that you want someday, and you also have an obligation to try and deal with some of the hardships that are around. And that's why St. Jude, became such an important component of the mission, and why we set out to raise, enough money that we actually felt might be able to move the needle here. We did. It was about $250 million. So that was what that first mission was grounded, because you couldn't do a whole lot more because it was the first. But it came back very successful, and that's how we were able to open the door for other exciting missions to follow. That's why the Polaris program came in, and then the next mission.
So can you say a little bit about, you do it once, and yet it must have been a good trip. You wanted to go back, and what were you trying to achieve with the Polaris?
So before we launched, we had some sense. I went and visited Starbase. So it's Brownsville, Texas. It's a city now. In the summer of 2021, it was still lots of tents and dirt, and I went there. I was like, it's not the best analogy to like the Manhattan Project and what Los Alamos looked like, but that's what it was like. It was like, this is a Manhattan Project level endeavor, the gateway to Mars. Essentially a privately funded endeavor to make life multiplanetary. And here it feels like this Los Alamos, almost in the desert type event where people are working on just an extraordinary mission, the near impossible. And I was like, this is incredible, and I'd love to be part of it. So I thought that there was a likelihood of follow-on missions. But we came back from Inspiration 4, and every one of our objectives was achieved, except we were just under the $225 million goal we had set to raise for St. Jude. And when right after splashdown, in like an hour, Elon tweeted out, put me in for $50 million. And we surpassed the goal, and there wasn't like a dry eye in the room. It was very emotional. And then I was like, maybe we set the bar sufficiently high here that we walk away from it. But it was about a couple weeks later, I went back to Starbase, I did meet with Elon, and we talked about what a developmental program could be. We are about to go from this moment of relatively traditional architecture with Dragon and Falcon, and it's reusable, that's cool, it brings costs down, but in line with what we've done previously, to this light switch-like moment when Starship comes online, we're going to fully reusable vehicle that you can manufacture at scale, that you can do on-orbit refueling, which will be a huge capability enabler for the vehicle to, yes, you can go to the moon, you can go to Mars, you can go to a lot of areas. I mean, this is almost going to be a light switch here, so there's things we need to learn along the way, and we got to get outside our comfort zone, and we got to go farther into space, and that teaches us about, the challenging environment of micrometeoroids, orbital debris, radiation, high energy deorbits. We're going to need spacesuits, but not like $100 million spacesuits, but ones that thousands of people could wear someday. new forms of communication, so we don't have to burden some of the existing legacy infrastructure. And I was all about it. I was like, I'm absolutely into a development program. And then we announced Blairstone 4 months later, and it took about 2.5+ years thereafter to fly it. But that was what was so exciting about it, was real development programs.
And so, I mean, you talked about St. Jude, and in the bio that I read, there were some other ways in which you've been engaged philanthropically. And I will say that's somewhat unusual for someone your age. How did that start? Why is that important?
I mean, as I mentioned before, I'm very grounded in the reality that I've been lucky in life. I mean, really, like you shouldn't leave school at 16, have any of the chances that I've been able to have or experiences in life, or sit before the United States Senate. I mean, and I think if you're in touch with that, and I'd say like a lot of very successful entrepreneurs generally are not. You're like, create all your own luck. There's no such thing as it. Total bullshit. I mean, the ball definitely bounced my way many times in life, and if you acknowledge that, then you also have to acknowledge the people that it didn't. That were dealt incredibly horrible hands in life, that some won't even have the chance to grow up and experience even a fraction of what I've been able to in life. So, two philosophies generally I keep close to my heart. Like, one is, I don't think you fulfill your purpose in life if you don't maximize the opportunities you're lucky enough to receive. And two, you have an obligation to the extent you can make the world a better place than you found it. So every one of the adventures I've been on, the around the world flights, the air shows you mentioned before, I've always tried to incorporate a charitable component. And with the human spaceflight mission, the platform is certainly big enough where you could try and make a real difference with it. And it will always be that way for me. Any endeavors I'm lucky enough to be on.
Well, I just would say that I applaud you for that, because I think that's actually really important. So, so back to space. I am always struck by the idea that space is 62 miles up. It's less distance from where we are to space than it is to New York City. And yet it's really hard to get there. Yes, it is. But it is getting easier. And the cost of launch is coming down dramatically. The safety, the reliability is much higher. So can you talk about what you see as the opportunities that are afforded to us as a country, to us as a species, as our ability to go those 62 miles becomes so much easier and cheaper?
Yeah, and there's so much to that. First, I mean, I think about, just to start, the general excitement there is to it, that space is so close to us, and the farthest we have gone is not even scratching the surface of what is the greatest adventure in human history. My last mission to space, we were the farthest into space anyone's gone since the last time we walked on the moon, about 1,400 kilometers. I was like, okay, so from here to Georgia. I mean, it's really not that far, and yet it's so damn hard to get there. And that was in a very harsh environment. We were right in the inner portion of Van Allen radiation belt. And it's like, I don't know, I think about when I was in, it was probably like social studies or geography class, and I was disappointed as a kid that we had discovered it all. We crossed all the oceans and seas, we found all the islands out there. If you wanted to grow up and be like an Indiana Jones and go out on these adventures, it just doesn't exist. Well, that's wrong. There is so much to go out there, and the closest we've gone is our neighbor moon, and there is so much. And it absolutely is our destiny to go out and explore and discover, and what we will inevitably find along the way will, just completely alter the course of human history. It's really exciting to think about. Now, the key enabler to all of this really comes down to incredibly low cost of launch. And this is the healthiest time we have ever had, in the history of the space program, in the launch market. There is a lot of them. I mean, you have the traditional players like the United Launch Alliance, which is a Boeing Lockheed joint venture. You got SpaceX they're launching every 2 days. I mean, really, like every 2 days they're launching Falcon 9s, and then every month and a half they launch their big skyscraper that they're working on, which is the fully reusable Starship. We're only about a month or so away from Blue Origin's new blend, which is also a very heavy launch vehicle. You got companies like Stoke working on full reusability. Rocket Lab just launched today. This is awesome. There's no other time in the history of human spaceflight we can just rattle off so many names of companies that are building rockets, and that's a good thing. I mean, we want competition. The more competition we have, the more it will drive innovation and bring down costs. And we need that because that comes to the next thing that's just totally foundational if we want to do really even have a future in space, which is we need the space economy. We need to figure out why we need to be in space and like how to unlock more value when we put into it, so that the future we want in space isn't just perpetually funded by taxpayers. Because if it is, it's going to be super disappointing, right? I mean, we got a 37 trillion or so national debt. Budgets are going down. We can't have this exciting future we want in space be entirely funded by taxpayers. We need a total game-changing moment where whether it's cancer-fighting drugs or crystal formulations or mining asteroids, I don't care what it is, we need to figure out that economy. When we do, that's going to fund the future we all want in space, and space will truly go from the select few to the many.
And I mean, you mentioned drugs and mining and other things. I mean, do you think that we even know or have any good ideas about what is the basis of that space economy that would be necessary to drive this?
Well, I mean, I'd venture some bets and directions I would go to, but I mean, as we said in our smaller roundtable, look, there's no way in the 1980s, when the first car phones came out, the cell phones that were so damn big you had to build them into the vehicle, and they were so expensive, and it was like, oh, that's just for rich Wall Street traders who always need to be connected. Space is just for the billionaires out there. Sounds very similar, right? Who would have ever thought, you roll it forward 20 or 30 years, some of the most valuable companies in the world are software companies on the mobile phone that you use to order food at 2 in the morning or connect with your friends on the other side of the world. No one could have predicted that. And since access to low Earth orbit has been so extraordinarily expensive up until now, there's been no experimentation. It has to be sure things, essentially. But that's going to change. That's going to change for all those launch providers we just talked about that are going to enable some experimentation, and inevitably we will crack the code. Now, if I had to bet, look, there are things we already know that are in space that are tangible, that have value, right? Whether it's helium-3 on the moon, there's virtually none of it here on Earth. There's a little bit more than none on the moon, a little bit better than here, but it has value. Asteroids are incredibly rich with important minerals and such. So if we crack the code on launch and down mass capability, or actually on orbit manufacturing, we could go out, we could retrieve some of them, and as long as we can get more value than what we put into it, you've got a space economy. I would be betting on things like that. The start, but really, it could just be the car phones in the 1980s to Meta today, and we have no idea. We can never predict it.
But I think whenever there's that kind of rapid drop in cost, I think about Moore's Law chips, I think about the cost of sequencing the genome, like there's opportunity there, even if we don't know what it is yet. So what do you think should be our kind of technical goals? I mean, in terms of space today, like what should we technically be trying to achieve? Is it cost? Is it establishing a permanent or semi-permanent base, on the moon? Is it a large installation in near Earth orbit? What do you think those should be? What would be the enabler that would allow us to really evaluate and figure out what this space economy would be?
Yeah, I mean, look, in terms of just two things that I think would be great breakthroughs for the good of the United States and really humankind, like the material reduction in launch costs to enable the experimentation to figure out the orbital economy. We need that before really anything else. To me, step 2, it is a technical requirement, but it has deep inspirational purposes, which is we need American astronauts back on the moon. Why go back? We did it, in 1969. We left with Apollo 17 because we said we would. And we said we would for 35 years now. We put $100 billion of taxpayer funds into it. And to get that done, you know what you have? You have more kids dressing up as astronauts for Halloween. And that is one of the best returns we can ever make as a nation, is inspiring the next generation to do it even better. And we had I don't think we did justice to the Apollo astronauts. They certainly delivered an awful lot of inspiration. It's time we go back, achieve that objective, and let the next generation take us even farther. So those are two really big objectives. I would say like a third one, it's definitely very much in the technical lane, is we need to start working on next generation forms of propulsion. And I think the industry is doing a fantastic job right now with chemical propulsion. So really making very powerful, efficient rockets at scale. That's what Blue Origin and SpaceX are doing with their vehicles. NASA should be working on things they are not capable of doing. I think you get some nuclear reactors in space. And the reason I like that, and you can draw some analogy to some of the submarines that can stand underwater for very long periods of time, is we need to start breaking space up into various phases. We don't necessarily have to we don't need to pack everything into one vehicle. So commercial industry gets really good dropping payload off in low Earth orbit. You can have a whole other vehicle in space that never needs to re-enter Earth's atmosphere, never needs to land on the moon, never needs to land on Mars, but can go back and forth between these destinations very efficiently. Almost think of like if you were going to try and go from New York to California yourself, you'd probably take an airline flight or something. But if you had to move a lot of tonnage of coal, you'd probably use a railroad track to do that. And taking that step with nuclear propulsion in space is really good because it allows us to go somewhere and then come back without having to refuel, which is a huge freaking problem right now. What if we discovered something extraordinary in Europa, for example? We could get there very easily. Getting back would be impossible, especially if you had to stop and retrieve something or something like Mars sample return or something. So anyway, and then if you do get to Mars, which we're going to have the technical means to do so pretty soon, you're going to have to make propellant to come back. Nuclear is going to play a good part. So those are kind of the three areas of big technical breakthroughs that would have the best long-term return for us.
So, I don't know if you know this, Lehigh just created a new master's program in aerospace and space systems engineering. And Terry Hart, our resident kind of key people involved, among others, in mechanical and other engineering. Do you have any advice or thoughts for the students who would be, some of the first to be in that program? Some, guidance for them as to maybe not so much what they would study, but how they should approach this whole industry.
Yeah. I would just say that first of all, whatever your line of study ultimately is, if you want a career, potentially in space someday, this is absolutely the best time for it. I mean, like I said, you have companies that are mass producing vehicles. A single Starship has more habitable volume than the International Space Station, and they have 2 factories building lots of them. That again, it's a light switch moment. This isn't like an incremental step towards getting more people in space. It's a giant leap. And if you are thinking about having outposts on Mars and Elon's goal of making a self-sustaining city on Mars, to in the event this supply shift stopped coming or something, you're going to need people with all sorts of educational background, disciplines, expertise on things to contribute to that new world, quite literally. But I will say, if you are looking to get into engineering, I would just highly recommend coupling with some study on AI. Space is a really interesting environment for it. With every direction that things are going essentially in space is going to wind up getting married with AI. So if it's uncrewed, robotic, Earth observation, anything like that, the sensors today are so good that the amount of data that they're gathering is impossible for any human analysis. Like you're going to be analyzing what the AI machine spits out at you. And then if you are thinking like anything deep space related, especially human exploration, the current construct where you have mission control, basically the army of people on the ground helping, army of people here under 1G, under an atmosphere, helping people that are in different circumstances, it's not going to work. Just transmission delays won't. So any future, deep space vehicle is going to have to incorporate AI for, on-ship based, at least analysis and potentially decision making. So I don't see any of the major engineering fields in aerospace not having a deep understanding of AI alongside it.
So we had a couple of faculty members, Jim Gilchrist, Kelly Schultz, and Xuanhong Cheng, had an experiment running on the ISS recently. And so that was one experiment. It was about moving the particles through liquids and gels in 0G and looking at how temperature changes and density changes can move particles. That's just one example, but I'm curious what you think of are the opportunities for universities to become more engaged through research areas or sort of research directions in this remarkable time that you've described in terms of our access to space.
So first, I guess I would just say that I think that we talked a lot about this thriving launch industry right now, bringing costs down to hopefully help us unlock an orbital economy, but it also can help us increase just our general understanding of physics, like just general good science. We can do more of it, and I'm quite sure, I don't know the background behind this particular school, but I've spoken to a number that the time frame to get, and the hoops you'd have to jump through to get science to the International Space Station or to a commercial crew flight or something like that, it's not easy to do, and there's probably an incredible down-select process on it. And I imagine as we have more vehicles and the costs come down, the willingness, the opportunities to fly more just good science missions, and just maybe couple that with what I said before on AI, like we will have a far greater understanding of physics just on the road ahead. But beyond that, to your question, I think it's absolutely essential that you start marrying academic institutions with science-related missions at NASA. That was going to be a huge agenda of mine. I probably wasn't in the opening remarks, in like a failed NASA nominee, so I might not know what the hell I'm talking about.
I think most of the audience are probably aware of it.
Yeah. But I will say, just knowing that the budget environment that we were in, a big agenda of mine was like, how can we make NASA like instead of like an in-house shop for all things related to science. They're not. They do lots of grants or whatever, but more of this force multiplier of science to take their understanding, their mission control architectures, their integration into space vehicles, and bulk buy launches and bus architecture, and go out to academic institutions, not jumping through hoops, but saying, here's our date for this particular mission, and are you interested in participating? And we will do whatever we can to help you get your payload on board of it. And just start increasing, time to science. It actually, to me, is like as a business person, like the KPIs are pretty important. It's like there is something that we stand to learn in space. There's just an absolute, there's incredible amounts to learn. And how do we cut down that time frame from when we embark on doing it to when we get our first discovery, and then with that information, shorten kind of the feedback loop to go back and learn even more. And to me, the way to do it is to bring at least all the academic institutions that are interested in this field and are willing to invest some of their resources, their talent, their student interest in it, and that becomes that big force multiplying effect.
So I have one more question, and then we'll open up to questions. And just there are some microphones here at each side of the room. So if you have a question, feel free to find your way up to the microphone. So my last question is: beyond all the technical aspects of getting to space, you going to space, how has going to space changed your perspective, your philosophy, and how would it change the world if everybody had the opportunity to go to space?
So it's interesting for those that kind of follow the field a little bit. You may be familiar with the overview effect, and this is kind of the reflections from astronauts of how they've been deeply changed by what they experienced. And I, by the way, have no doubt that during the Mercury and Gemini days, when the pictures from early satellites were black and white and grainy, when they probably looked out the window and saw Earth, my guess is they were pretty. That was probably a highly impactful moment. But I think of late, we do have a lot of high resolution footage from space. I generally don't think you need to go to space to know that we shouldn't fight wars over lines drawn on maps 100 years ago or destroy our environment, things of that nature. So for me, my impact was much more. It actually is akin to what actually several Apollo astronauts said, which is all of the kind of convictions or beliefs or faith I had in life, going to space only reinforced it. Is kind of how I believe, which was the journey in space. Like that journey of exploration and discovery is the greatest adventure in human history, and we have not even like dipped our toe in the grandest sea of all. Like we have really just begun, and who knows what we might find out there. And that is what I felt when I went there. It was like it's an appreciation for how small we are in the grand scheme of things, and how exciting it must be of what's out there and what we may come to learn.
Thank you very much. We'll turn it now to some questions. How about we start over here?
Oh, can you hear me? Okay. Hi, Jared. I'm Rob. I'm a Lehigh alumnus, and I want to thank you for speaking to the Lehigh community today. I really appreciate your feedback and your vision, and it's really interesting, actually. My question is simply, I understand your interest and your philanthropy, and a lot of your stuff is focused on STEM and science and engineering. What do you say to this crowd about the importance of an arts and education, an arts background in science and technology?
Oh, I mean, I think that you need. I totally believe in contributions from all, I guess, like all backgrounds or interests. Like I mean, maybe one of the ways to describe it, on my first mission in space, I didn't know any of my crew members, prior to beginning training, and when I thought back on what was like the most special moments in space, I thought it would be more operational related, but in fact, it was actually seeing everyone be exactly who they are. The pilot on our mission, Dr. Cyan Proctor, I remember her painting and working on her poetry. My crew member, Haley Arsenault, was a medical officer, the one who had childhood cancer. It was taking a picture of herself side by side with the window and earth behind her, and a picture of her without any hair when she was going through cancer treatment, or Hank's, Kristen Broski, when he was playing the ukulele. It was kind of all those human moments that came together that made us a crew that you normally is somewhat absent from like really technical operations, if you will. So I'd say like I have a great appreciation for its contributions. Like I'm not a very talented artist. I wouldn't even attempt it. My children are far superior at that, and thank goodness for that. So it's important for the world.
My name's Bob Swaying. I collect human-powered vehicles, and two wrongs never make a right, but two rights imply differently. And so thinking back to the history of the Wright brothers, they weren't right. So I have like 200 pieces of unique human-powered vehicles, and I see that as a health standpoint, contribute to a health standpoint rather than everything roadwise. Are museums obsolete in your opinion?
Are museums obsolete? No, not at all. By the way, on an interesting note, I was at a test pilot school summit, was honored at the same time as an individual who set a number of records on human-powered aircraft being made. It's very fascinating. It was all bicycles, and I'm sure you know better than me. The name's lost in the money, but really incredible stories. No, of course we need museums. Hopefully I'm interpreting the question correctly, but I'm a big believer in the importance of our history and like protecting and cherish from the things that were major or pivotal moments in our past, so we can learn from going forward, and certainly the things that we got wrong and can never be repeated. So no, the world needs museums.
Is there anything from Inspiration 4 or Polaris Dawn that will end up or should end up in a museum?
Well, every one of our spacesuits wound up in different museums. So Dr. Proctor's is in the Smithsonian. Haley Arsenault, actually just a little over a week ago, we unveiled her spacesuit at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which I think is pretty damn important to inspire all those kids. You can beat this and you can grow up. Chris's is at Space Camp, where he was a counselor, and mine is at the Kennedy Space Center.
Thank you for a wonderful talk.
Short-term ones like that, and then long-term ones that are, cardiovascular related, vestibular systems and such. And normally I talk a little bit about, that we've reached a point where we now have the technical ability to make very long duration spaceflight missions possible. We still got to work on the coming home part, but we haven't solved for the human body, and even there's a psychology element to it too. But I've since kind of, dialed it back a little bit. And just the reason why is that if extremely low cost of launch comes to fruition, which it will, I mean, it's already come down materially, but we're really on the precipice of, again, that light switch moment. Then you're going to be able to put enough mass up where you should be able to induce artificial gravity environments. So just like the sci-fi movies, you see the spinning spaceship, like that would solve a lot of the issues. It won't solve the psychological ones. That's a whole other set of problems in itself. But then the question just becomes, what is the right gravity? I mean, it's pretty binary now. It's either one on Earth or you're near zero in microgravity. But what if for long missions we could keep it, say 0.3 or a half G or something? Could you then do surgery in that environment, which has never been done in space before, or like childbirth, like things that might become a reality with true spacefaring civilization. So I guess it's like absolutely the human is a problem right now. It creates a lot of realistic limitations for us. But I guess I have to believe, like, if we do solve for launch and we do solve for the space economy, then creating artificial gravity environments, shouldn't be like it shouldn't be like impossible to overcome.
Big fan of everything you've done. I've watched all your missions live, and I want to work in space flight. So after all your time working, looking at NASA, do you think NASA should be the one developing a spacecraft to go to Mars with, or in addition to commercial, or should we just commercial companies doing Mars, making a spacecraft to take people to Mars? And also, I have your patch, and Sarah Gillis and Anna Menon signed it for me. So I was wondering whether you could sign it too.
100%. It will happen. Sarah Gillis and Anna Menon were two of my crew members on the last mission. They're also the women who traveled farthest from Earth ever, which is pretty awesome. And Anna, most recently, was selected by NASA to be a NASA astronaut, which is pretty awesome too. So, great people. You asked an exceptionally good question that's come up a lot lately of what should NASA be doing? What should SpaceX or Blue Origin be doing? Do we even need NASA anymore? And it's like, it's a great opportunity to just, set expectations. One, we absolutely need NASA. America needs NASA, the world needs NASA. NASA absolutely should be out doing, and creating just world-shocking headlines and inspiring the next generation, like I mentioned before, to contribute. This is just a recalibration from time to time. NASA did not get to the moon on their own. You had Grumman, McDonnell Douglas building vehicles, Boeing, everybody contributed to that extraordinary effort, right? And it's no different now. NASA needs to work on, and why we all contribute as taxpayers, on the near impossible, what no business could ever underwrite a business model against. It's purely for the good of humanity, right? And then things that they've already figured out or cracked the code on that commercial industry is capable of doing, and that actually has demand. It's also very important too. There's a real demand pipeline for it. Hand it off to commercial industry and let them innovate and drive down costs so that we can use more of NASA's budget for the near impossible again, right? So we talked before, I'm very big in getting nuclear electric propulsion in space. You're going to need it for a number of reasons while you're up there. That's something that a SpaceX can't do, but you know how helpful it would be to? Because for that occupies Mars to get there. I'm very sure, the next couple of years, it's going to be near conclusive that Starship will be able to get people to Mars. Then how do we get them back? We're going to have to make propellant on Mars. Not under an atmosphere, not under 1G. That's going to take a lot of miracles. And we're never sending people to Mars unless we're able to get them back, for sure. But I tell you, nuclear power plus ice we can make propellant with, for sure. And we're not going to need lots of football field size solar arrays that are going to be covered in dust to do it. And we can also use nuclear power to cool the cryogenic propellant that we're going to necessarily need on, to keep it from boiling off on long missions. Not to mention, it's a great way, using the train analogy again, to move lots of mass, maybe not the fastest way, but efficiently to Mars. So yeah, NASA plus industry can equal extraordinary things.
All right, we have time.
Mr. Isaacman, you have been very successful in many different fields throughout your whole career, and I'm curious, as a student, what habits and mindset help drive you to stay and just perform?
I was very lucky too, so who knows how accurate any of this is. I mean, what my approach is, I try not to do lots of littles. I'm really concentrated on one or two things that I think can, again, move the needle, and I try and give it absolutely as much of my attention as I can. I don't think that, especially in business, you can do. I mean, look, if you get it to a mature state and you want to do it part time or passively, that's fine. But as you're building and trying to do hard things, you got to give it 110%. You need to have a really good plan. You can adjust your plan and just never stop listening to data, but have a very good plan and try and vet that with a number of folks. And I obsess over decisions I make, especially the ones I got wrong. I'll go back and look at emails from 15 years earlier to understand what went into my decision making then versus versus now, and try and really never stop trying to, I guess, learn from it. And the other thing too, I'd say is on whatever journey you're on, where you will inevitably run into problems, issues, unexpected setbacks, or whatever, the first step, at least my advice into it, is figuring out whatever the hell you did to cause it. And I think leaders, bad leaders, tend to look at the people around them instead of what they contributed to it, and that kind of endless self-reflection on the decisions you made that either resulted in a good or bad outcome, and starting with yourself as where the problem might be in order to fix it, will make you better, which means the next time maybe your chances of winding up in a better outcome versus a negative one are a little bit better as well. So that's what comes to mind.
Thank you. Last question.
Okay, so obviously you're an entrepreneur yourself. I just wanted to ask, where does that entrepreneurial mindset fit into the space industry with the cost barrier so high, obviously? How can I fit my love for space into wanting to start my own business doing that type of thing?
Hey, it's a really great question. I mean, when I started my payments company, my parents' basement, it was not a capital-intense business at all. I mean, it was all everything we did our first 4 or 5 years was all operational improvements, bringing functions in-house instead of paying others to try and deliver a better experience. It was not capital-intense. And you're like, well, I want to be an entrepreneur in the space industry. Space industry is filled with hardware. How do I get into this without lots of capital? And you're totally right. I was back to being lucky. I was lucky I picked the first industry that did not necessitate external capital to get going. What I'd say is probably work for another space company for a little bit and learn, and their stock is generally appreciated well. I mean, I have no doubt that a lot of the entrepreneurs today that are in not just commercial space industry, I mean, I know alum from SpaceX that are starting mobile pizza making machines that are using rocket engines to cook it. It probably tastes great. And it's because they started, right out of college with not much, and 10 years later, they probably have a 10 million in stock or something. And obviously there's a number of other aerospace related companies that have seen appreciation and value too. So I guess I'd say is if you've identified the kind of general sector you want to be in, and work really hard, get into a company that you would be happy working at, that you could learn from there. That's only going to help you when you eventually go on your own, but along the way you might be able to accumulate some resources that can contribute to it. At the very least, you're gonna meet people, and there's a whole VC community that loves making 1,000 bets out there, and those that have on their resume companies that have already been successful generally are at the top of the list.
Great. Well, thank you, Jared.